Welcome back to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristin. I'm your host, Kristin Saxena. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about intuitive eating. This episode is specifically for the moms and dads. I'm very excited to be joined by our guest today, Registered Dietitian Michelle Yates. She's going to share her work and what she's learned about this important topic. Welcome to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristin, where we help you navigate the challenges of feeding your family and learn about the role food plays in our health and relationships. Feeding and food relationships can be stressful, confusing, and even destructive. I'm Kristin Saxena, a pediatrician and mother of 4 who's been researching and sharing what I've learned about feeding for over 10 years. In this podcast, I'll share my experience and expertise to help our kids and ourselves with everyday survival tips for real parents. This podcast is about progress, not perfection. So let's get started. Well, thanks for joining us, Michelle.
Yes, this is amazing. I'm so excited to be here.
We're excited to have you.
Yeah.
So you are a registered dietitian and a self-proclaimed anti-diet dietitian. Is that right?
Yes, there's no certification to be anti-diet. So yes, it's
has to be self-proclaimed.
Yeah.
So, and what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so much, but it's kind of an umbrella statement of like, okay, I'm not supporting that we just go around and tell everybody to follow, Nutrisystem or go do Noom or do everything in their power to lose weight no matter what it takes. Like, I'm super anti-diet of that because I see the harmful effects of that.
Yeah.
And I also work with eating disorders. So that kind of, you're never going to meet an eating disorder dietitian that's not anti-diet. Let's just say that.
That does make sense. That does make sense. But I think it is kind of a differentiator in some ways compared to maybe other registered dietitians or just dietitians in general that maybe people have worked with or known before. Because I know, like, being within the medical community, I wouldn't say that there are people that certainly recommend specific diets.
Yeah.
And it is more of a sort of prescriptive diet culture, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
So I do think that that's a important distinction.
Yeah.
Even though, like you said, there's no specific certification or specific definition. I think it's important to highlight maybe how you approach things a little bit different than
yes. And I will say, even to tease it out a little bit more, as a dietitian, I can prescribe diets. It's a part of my qualifications, I guess, in training. My whole with being anti-diet, it's like, okay, we're only going to use diets when it's absolutely medically necessary. Somebody has high blood pressure, then yes, we'll talk about doing a low sodium diet. But we don't need to just throw that around willy-nilly or have everybody go on the keto diet when they're not a child with epilepsy. Like, that's the only time I would prescribe that. So that's, I think, maybe a little bit to clarify anti-diet a little bit more is we're anti-diet in the sense of let's not use them unless they're absolutely necessary. And I don't count needing to lose weight as medically necessary. That doesn't fly with me.
Well, so I think that what I really wanted to have you on to talk about was the concept of intuitive eating.
Yes.
And I think it's kind of funny, and I'm really interested to kind of hear what your definition is, but intuitive eating, on the one hand, I feel like is almost like a popular buzzword that people are using all the time, maybe sometimes appropriately, sometimes inappropriately. And on the flip side, it's sort of like, to me, I always say, most children are kind of born intuitive eaters.
Yes.
So in some ways, it's sort of like how it's always been.
Yep.
And the way that we started out, the most of us. And so to me, sometimes it's even more of a like refinding or finding that place that we all used to be at.
Yeah.
But can you, for our listeners that maybe are interested or kind of starting to hear things about intuitive eating, feeling like maybe this is a concept that resonates with me for one reason or another, can you talk to us a little bit about what it means?
Absolutely. And I think you kind of nailed it. It's going back to what we're already programmed knowing how to do, which is just eat normally. And I think normally it's so funny to use that word, like what is normal? Because 95% of people aren't eating normally by the time they grow up to be an adult. We're taught you need to watch this, you need to care about this, you need to look like this, and we stop listening to how we're programmed. And so intuitive eating is, it's tuning back into what are those like survival mechanisms? What are the messages that your body gives you that are all you need when it comes to nutrition? Like, I think my job, a lot of times I laugh like that I have to tell people how to eat, you know? It's like, honestly, you already know, but you just have unlearned it. So intuitive eating is getting back into the groove of what you were born knowing how to do, regulating portions and listening to what feels good and what is nourishing, and also what's just fun to eat because it's fun to eat sometimes, and eating normally.
Yeah. And it sounds so simple.
Yeah.
But it's become so difficult, I think. And so, I think that there's so many things that create this sort of unlearning process as we grow older. Right. And so, like, with the people that you've worked with, what's sort of been their experiences where they have felt like these are sort of key things that they think have kind of got them off track or made them not intuitive eaters? Because, like, I was thinking too, it's like we know more and we talk more and I think more about what we eat now more than ever. And yet, as a society, a lot of indicators would say maybe we're unhealthier than we ever have been before. So
right. Isn't that so interesting too? Yeah. A lot of things, or a trend that I see with women that I work with, is just how they were raised, you know? And that's nothing on the parents, because I think as parents, like, we're all just trying our best, you know, and we're just doing what we think is the right thing. But a lot of times what ends up happening is that as children, you get these messages of, dessert has to be earned, or a certain body size, certain body weight is better or healthier. And if somebody is bigger, then they're doing something wrong, or they're lazy or whatever. And so those kind of messages, they really stick with a kid. Yeah. And that's true for me too. That's kind of what my childhood was like. And so that seems to be a common theme with the women I work with is, well, I just always heard this, and I was always told this in school or from a teacher, from a parent. And now it's just, I don't know how to unthink that, because that's what I've heard so often. Does that make sense?
And I think on the flip side of that, I know, for a lot of people too, they came from the world of like clear your plate, or, kids that maybe were thinner growing up, it's been even always, I think, a little more socially acceptable to tell those kids like, oh, you need to eat something, or you need to, I think so. All of the commentary you receive on what you should and shouldn't eat, or why your body is too big or too small, and why it's necessary to, eat more or less than your body is telling you to do. I think it's easy to see where, to me, I've always felt like it becomes where you start to not trust the signals, where you learn to ignore the signals that your body's giving you.
I agree. I think that's what we're being taught in that situation that you're explaining is, well, whatever your intuition says is not right. And so we have to, based on what you look like, we need to fix it and make sure that you're eating more or eating less, because apparently you need more or less based on how you look.
Yeah. And I think, we talk a lot on the show, obviously, about feeding your family. Yeah. And a lot of what kids learn, not only is the messaging that you give them as kids, but also the kind of eating and behavior and relationship with food and your body that you model. Yeah. And I always think, A, it is so important, and B, that's super stressful, I think, as a parent, because totally. You go, oh my gosh, like, I just want to help my kid. What do you mean I have to like fix myself first? Like, but I think that we all feel like, oh, I have all these struggles. I don't want my kid to, I want my kid to have a better relationship with food. I want my kid to be a better eater than I was, or whatever it is. And it's like, to me, it's always like, oh, that's very stressful to think, like, probably the most important thing is what I do. Totally. Because that's what they're going to see.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. But, I kind of love this concept, because what I was hoping is that you could kind of share with us what are some of the benefits of intuitive eating, because even though I feel like, oh, that feels like a huge pressure to shoulder, like, oh my gosh, I have to work through my own baggage to be the best mom possible for my kids. But really, if we talk about, adopting a more intuitive eating style will not only be good for modeling for your child, but also, what are the benefits to you? Because I think, I guess let's just start there. What are some of the benefits of this more intuitive eating?
I think there's a lot. There is nothing like going from constantly reading nutrition labels, constantly worrying about what's in your food and where you're at with your goals that day, how many calories you have left, what if you can eat this meal or not. There is nothing like going from that to just being like, what am I in the mood for? What sounds good? And being able to live your life. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to is, do you want a better quality of life or not? And I think we get stuck in this belief system that we have to track everything. We have to micromanage what we eat in order to have the perfect health, and that's helping our quality of life. But I'm such an advocate for, we got to pay attention to what's going on in the head as well. Mental health is huge here. Your head is attached to your body, so it is a part of your overall health. And if you're obsessive with food, if you're, missing out on quality time with your family because you don't want to eat what they're eating or whatever, that's not contributing to your overall health, because that's pretty sad. That's a sad life. So it comes down to, do you want to enjoy your life and not be so stressed all the time? And beyond that too, I mean, it's shown to help with reducing cardiovascular risks and blood glucose control. I actually have PCOS, so polycystic ovarian syndrome. I don't remember the latest statistics. I think it's something crazy, 1 in 4 women have it or something. So
it's very common.
Super common. And doctors don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, it is. It's sort of very common. I feel like they know a lot of things associated with it, but it's true. It's they're difficult to manage, by individual.
Totally. So as somebody that has that, I'm always at a risk for developing insulin resistance and then diabetes or gestational diabetes. And so, there was a concern for me adopting intuitive eating, okay, how is this going to affect my blood sugar control, basically? And it's done nothing but help it. So, and I see that in my clients as well, because you're giving your body the chance to let you know, hey, things are going well or not. And then you kind of adjust from there. Cholesterol, I mean, you can go down the list of all these laboratory values that are improved with intuitive eating. But I think at the end of the day, it's you want to have a good quality of life, and do you want to be on your deathbed? This is a little sad, but do you want to be on your deathbed and thinking, I'm so glad that I counted every calorie and followed that diet plan and was miserable? Or are you going to be glad that you were able to focus on the people around you,
Yeah. Well, I think that really resonated with me just because, everyone kind of goes through their own life experience and relationship with food. And I do think that, I'm a physician. I was in medicine, went through medical school.
Yeah.
I was, your stereotypical kind of type A.
Yeah.
And then the more you learn, I think you're sort of perfectionist and you think, I'm getting all this information.
Yeah.
And for a while, I felt like I've always had this interest in health and nutrition, but it's easy to have that kind of take center stage in your psyche. Totally. And so it kind of goes too far. Well, this is great. I'm learning so much. I'm going to keep learning. What is the exact amount of, this nutrient and that nutrient I need?
Right.
What is the exact amount of calories a person of, my size and activity level needs? And medicine is very much like that. There's a lot of, algorithms, and there's a lot of equations, and I'll do the math and I'll figure it out. And I've said this before on the show too, but I think having kids teaches you a lot of things. Yeah. And to me, that was one of them, because even without my, the way I was feeding myself, I always say, when I started my pediatric training before I had my first child. And I remember with food and really with everything, it was sort of, but especially feeding kids, people would come with all these problems and I didn't understand, because I was I could tell you exactly what your child should be eating. I don't know why people don't just listen. And then I had a kid and I was
Yeah.
Like, that's not how they work, right? So there's always this real life application. You start to realize, like, you can have all the knowledge, and it's not that that's not wrong. It's not that that isn't the calorie expenditure or the daily value of X vitamin that your body uses. Right. However, that's not the way that real people work. Yeah. And so I think then you start to learn, like, oh, I understand. Like, it's just about variety and offering, and then your child will eat however much they're going to eat based on listening to their body and their hunger cues. And their body will actually, like, select these things over time. They'll select a variety of foods and nutrients. And to me, that was that big, like, aha moment where I was like, I get it. And that's actually the way that probably we're not all supposed to have medical degrees or be food scientists. We're supposed to just be able to listen to our body. Yeah. And, you know, do the same thing that you see toddlers doing, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I heard a quote, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but it was something that came across my email, and he was talking about just the psychology with eating and everything. And he was saying, like, everybody knows how to eat healthy. We don't need to teach them how to eat healthy anymore. Like, they know.
Like, they get it. Vegetables are good for you.
Totally.
Cheetos, less so.
We get it.
We know that. Everyone knows that.
Like, we know, but that doesn't mean they're doing it. So that's where we need to ask why and dig more into the psychology of eating. And that's what I love about intuitive eating is that you are getting into the psychology of it. You're asking yourself the questions like, why is this food a trigger for me? Why is this food something that makes me feel this way? And is that something that I want to continue or not? Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. Why do I feel like I need to have a whole lot of this, but it doesn't make me feel good physically? Like, you're asking yourself those good questions that lead you to the root of why you eat the way you eat, you know, and then can lead you back to normally eating again. Because, everybody knows you're supposed to have more vegetables. Like, it's not helpful.
So this campaign to tell everyone, I kind of agree. Like, I said that too. I think a lot of that, we keep presenting the same information.
And expect change.
And nothing changes. Yeah. So maybe we should change the way that we're presenting the information.
Absolutely.
And I think that has a lot to do with it too. Like you said, I think it's really a lot of the psychology behind it and realizing what are the things that have taken us away from this thing that we were sort of inborn, this intuitive experience. Yeah. So I assume too then, like, since you work in this space a lot, talk about intuitive eating a lot, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about intuitive eating?
Oh, I think the biggest one is that intuitive eaters just like eat, I don't like this phrase, but they just eat junk food all day long. And it's just, here's the thing. When you give yourself unconditional permission to eat, right, anything, then it loses its luster. It comes down off of its pedestal. And let's just imagine, let's say that I love cookies and cream ice cream, and I'm going to allow myself to eat however much of it I want because I'm an intuitive eater. Hashtag intuitive eating.
I mean, so far, this sounds luxurious. I'm like, if you haven't sold intuitive eating with just that sentence, then I don't know how you
eat as much cookies and cream ice cream as you want. I mean, you can. So with that permission, though, comes the reality of, okay, so I'm going to have it for breakfast. Sure, why not? And then that kind of sounds good for lunch, too. Honestly, by dinner time, in that one day, I'm probably not going to want it anymore. Or maybe it'll take the next day. I don't know. But the point is, when you eat things and they lose their luster and they become normalized, they're all on the same moral compass, then you start to realize what your body's really wanting. And it's not going to be ice cream at every meal. Sometimes that does sound really good, though. And that's okay. There's calcium and protein in there, you know? But I think that's a big misconception is, and maybe even just a fear that people have with intuitive eating is that if I allow myself to go down that route, then I'm just going to lose all self-control and all bets are off, you know? My health's going to go downhill because I'm just going to eat Cheetos all day. But that's not how it goes, you know? That's not the vibe. When there's all of these options, then it's like, okay, actually now kind of a salad sounds great. And that's how it is.
Okay. So then I guess, I think too, you've worked with a lot of people in terms of people who are having issues with binge eating, which I think is super common, even if you're not a person that might qualify for like a binge eating disorder diagnosis. The behavior, I always say, like, even if you don't qualify for an eating disorder diagnosis, we have a lot of disordered eating.
Totally.
Very prevalent. So I think that that's something that resonates also with a lot of people. And then when you say things like, okay, I'm going to be an intuitive eater, and then the back of their head, they go, and intuitively, I have a feeling all I'm going to do is eat ice cream and Cheetos. Then I assume that sparks a lot of anxiety, like, and then, this will turn into just another yo-yo type situation. And I've been down that road before, and it sounds very scary.
Totally.
So I guess then maybe what advice do you have then for people like just getting into it? They're like, okay, that sounds all wonderful. Like first I'm going to eat all the ice cream, but then I'm going to want salads. Sure. Like, you know what I mean? That's a lot of faith.
Yeah.
So like, how do you get started if you feel like I have not been intuitive eating and I don't even know? Because I think the big concern to me would be like, I don't even know how to do that. Like,
yeah. I think the cliche answer that is actually very true is it's always helpful to have help and just to have somebody, even if it's not a dietitian, just somebody that is an intuitive eater that has gone through the process to kind of guide you through it. Because there are a lot of nuances to it, and there's a lot of layers to, again, why we eat the way we eat, and then every day is going to look a little different too. And so it's not we're usually used to these cookie cutter meal plans or diet systems or whatever. So to completely throw all that out the window feels, like you said, scary. And it's a big unknown. So it helps to have somebody there to walk you through, okay, well, this is probably what you're feeling. Have you thought about this, etc. But also with getting started, like in the case of a binge eater, somebody that has that behavior, no matter how often it is, intuitive eating feels scary because again, they're giving themselves permission that they don't trust themselves with. But if we're going to get started with trying to put an end to that, we have to think about what hasn't been working for us. And usually it's not giving yourself permission to eat those things, right? That usually sets us up for failure. So I think for somebody starting out, you just got to like kind of give yourself a little faith and give yourself a little grace as well, because it's not going to be this perfect, like I'm eating eggs in the morning and then I'm having a sandwich and then I'm having a salad. And then I'm having ice cream from time to time. It's not going to be a perfect balance right away. There's going to be learning curves. There's going to be weird situations. There's going to be emotions. So heaps and heaps of grace because you're going to need it. And it's scary. Yeah.
So, I guess that would be the question, because I anticipate like a lot of people who are hearing this and they say, they've maybe been on various diets, and I think it's so tempting. I mean, for even whatever you're trying to do, whether you're trying to lose weight or build muscle or who even knows what. I mean, at this point, it's like a special diet for your depression and a special, you look it up.
Blood type.
Yeah, exactly. You look it up and you can find a very specific grocery list and meal plan and, hour by hour, what you should or shouldn't be eating. And it's everywhere now. I mean, it's, and it finds you at this point, on Instagram or whatever. Even if you don't look for it, you look for, you just talk about what you're concerned about and that diet will find you.
Absolutely.
And I think you're right, though, because I think to me, I love this idea of with the anti-diet, like probably anybody looking for this intuitive eating or other information, why are you looking? And it's probably because you've never been able to find a diet or at least stay on a diet that actually gave you any sort of like sustained result that you wanted.
Yeah.
So, to me, I guess too, I thought that really reinforced this idea of like, we're all looking for this great diet, but has anyone, maybe they have, and those just aren't the people that are looking for it. And that's maybe they found the one that just fit their intuition and it's perfect. But overall, I mean, I think like you don't meet a lot of people that forever tell you that they found this great diet and it's working for them.
For sure. I think that's absolutely true. And the diet industry is just this revolving door of the same system over and over again, where people try something and then it fails them, but they blame themselves, of course. They say it was their fault. And then they go back and try something different, or maybe the same system. And it's just this repeated cycle. And you have to like zoom out and think about, who is this benefiting? It's not benefiting the individual going on the diet, that's for sure. Because
not any long term.
Not long term, absolutely. And you know, so then who is it benefiting? It's benefiting the people that are making the money off of it. So I think you're right. You don't often meet somebody that's like, oh yeah, I've been doing keto for like 35 years,
right?
You know?
Right.
And that's why, you know, when somebody says, oh yeah, but I am doing this and it's working really well and I love it and it makes sense with my life, I'm like, okay, how long have you been on it? And they're like, 6 months. And I'm like, talk to me in 6 years. Like,
yeah,
you know, and that's not to, you know, shame them or by any means. It's, let's zoom out again and just think about what's logical here. Like, can you do that the rest of your life? Do you really want to put yourself through those restrictive behaviors and rob yourself of being able to have bread with your family, you know? Have communion at church on Sunday, like
yeah, right. Like I can't. That's not in my macros.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, I think there's a problem here.
It's probably happened. That's hilarious.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure
like, no,
people
I'm
are
not
tracking
doing carbs today.
Yeah. So yeah, people are crazy.
So what about this idea of being in the camp of, yes, you know, I think that intuitive eating makes sense. That's something that I would like to adopt or kind of take on more as a lifestyle.
Yeah.
But how do you marry that with the idea of still saying, but I would like to change some things about the way that I eat, whether that be more variety or more fruits and vegetables, or, you know, maybe something a little bit more philosophical in the sense like I'd like to, you know, eat less meat or more local, or, you know, anything really where they're looking to say like because the thing about eating and food is, on some ways like this, it is actually quite simple, but because of the world we live in and society and the economy and the world, it is a little bit more complicated. So are there ways to consciously change the way that you eat because you believe in it, or you do believe, like, I do think this would be healthier for me and I would feel better, while still incorporating this idea of like, but eating intuitively?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you're touching on the concept of gentle nutrition and authentic health. So what I do with my clients is I walk them through, okay, let's just break down all your rules first off. Let's just get them out of here. I don't care what they are, where they came from. First, we just need to focus on the whole intuition part. And then we can talk about things like that. Like, okay, do you actually really value eating local and supporting local farmers? Or do you have ethical concerns about eating meat and everything? Like, there's a place for that for sure. Like, that's really important to people. And I wouldn't say it necessarily disrupts the intuitive eating process either. Because what you can do then is you can ask yourself, okay, what sounds good? But then also, what does my body need? And how can I like marry this with what's important to me? So I think it's a fine line between, this is just important to me and it's a value I have, versus this is a disordered motivation that I have. So I think that's up to the individual to kind of tease out and even talk through with somebody or a professional. But I think it's certainly possible. And that's another misconception too with intuitive eating, is that it's just not a healthy diet and there's not balance and you're not getting enough vegetables or whatever it is, which isn't true, because those are values. And it comes along with that process of your body's going to start requesting more nutrients once you learn to listen to that and you learn what it sounds like, so to speak. So yeah, it's definitely possible to add in those values with listening to your body, because they really just go together, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well, and, you know, one of the more difficult concepts that I've always thought was the idea of approaching processed foods. And I'm a big believer in an all foods fit, you know, and I certainly don't. We have all kinds of processed food at my house.
Yeah.
So I'm not, you know, but at the same time, like what you learn about the food industry, there's lots of reasons why, maybe ethically, but also, you know, I think it can work against some intuitive eating because of the way that some foods are designed to maybe satiate you in ways that, you know, weren't the way nature intended. In the sense, like, I do believe that there can be some kind of confusion internally, you know, even if you're trying to be intuitive, it's not, the messaging is a little bit confusing, I would guess, to your body. And so to me, that has always been one where I've grappled a little bit, because in the sense, like, you know, when I feel like an Oreo, I feel like an Oreo. You know what I mean? I don't know what's in there. I'm not sure what's making me want that, but I want it. And I think that can, like I said, I understand. I believe that can all be part of a healthy relationship with food. But I also don't want to ignore the fact that, I mean, there is science behind the production of a lot of these foods to do certain things, you know, to make us want it, maybe more than we would have wanted it naturally. All those components that are in the Oreo. So how do you kind of talk people through that process in the sense of, you know, like, this is okay, but identifying also, like, you know, it is what it is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's why moderation is so important, and why that, again, permission is so important, because those foods that you're kind of touching on, that maybe perhaps the way they're manufactured is a really good business idea, and they're just making it extra addictive so that you go buy more, right? And yeah, there is science there to support the things that taste really good. They usually taste really good for a reason. And so I think it's important that we always prioritize the permission to eat those, even if we know that information, because immediately what happens once you start to get caught up in but this is maybe bad or unhealthy or too processed, is that we just want it more. So it's like kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you're trying to be mindful of it, but then reversing that effect and, you know, reverse psychology, getting yourself to be hooked on it even more, because now we've got this complex of it's forbidden or whatever. So, but yeah, I think it's interesting. It always depends on the person too, with how much they actually care about nutrition. Not everybody really wants to know all that stuff or look into it. So some people will look into that and be like, well, maybe that's something I don't really want in my body then, and they can make that choice for themselves, and that's totally fine.
But on the same path, I feel like not a lot of people lay on their deathbed and say, like, I'm glad I skipped all those Oreos.
Totally. Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that is, like, just the mindset of making sure you're not making things forbidden or restricted. I think we think of that with kids, I think, a lot, because I talk to that to parents a lot about restricting with kids. And of course, whatever you say is off limits, that's going to be the first thing that they go for as soon as they can. You know, if you're that family that's so proud of, you know, no sugar in the house, well, your kid's going to be the kid in the sugar coma at the birthday party for sure.
Absolutely.
But it's the same thing that we do to ourselves. I think the same thing, you know, the same moment that we decide that, you know, we're going to cheat. That's where you see these, like, and not only am I going to cheat, I'm going to, like, blow it up. I'm not going to have a piece of cake. I'm going to have the cake.
It's got to be worth it. Right?
Yeah. And I think that goes, I think something that you've talked about before too, that I really loved, was this idea that I know I was guilty with a lot of aspects of life, is this idea of this all or nothing thinking. And I think that goes a lot, like, into building this sort of sense of intuitive eating too, is to say, like, it's not, you didn't ruin it. You didn't ruin anything. Nothing has to be perfect. It's not all or nothing. It's not either, you know, I'm keto, I'm paleo, or I'm
unhealthy or
a
something.
cake at a time. Like those are not the two things. And I think that's the kind of mindset, like we're either being good or we're being bad.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I tell my clients, like, hey, nutrition is cumulative. It's not you ate this one thing, therefore I hate the phrase you are what you eat. You know, like I get it. I'm a dietitian. Sure. I get it. But
corn, you're corn. That's what everyone's corn anyway, so it doesn't matter. If you are what you eat, you're all corn. It doesn't matter.
Exactly. But I mean, I also hate that phrase because then it's almost like putting too much weight on your diet then, because it's like, well, if I eat this one thing this one time, then suddenly it's going straight to my hips, or, you know, a moment on the lips, forever on the hips. Like, stupid phrases like that make us so afraid that, and put us in that all or nothing mentality where it's like, well, I can't do this once or my life is ruined forever. It's like, no, nutrition's cumulative. Like, your body can handle it. It's fine. Like, it'll be gone by tomorrow. Like, it'll be processed within hours. You know, you're fine.
Yeah.
So,
and like, I mean, every hour is a new hour. Every day is a new day.
Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, this has been super useful. What other information for anybody that, like I said, this is really resonating with them? They think like, this is it, intuitive eating. Like, this is, I'm going to feel good about this. This is going to be good for me. Obviously this is your specialty. So how do they get in contact with you? What resources do you recommend for next steps for our moms and dads out there that are looking for more information?
Yeah, I would say if you're somebody struggling with binge eating or emotional eating or just kind of in that dieting roller coaster, I'd love to chat with you and talk about what next steps could look like for you. As we've talked about, intuitive eating is not just a matter of health, it's also just a matter of quality of life. And so if you feel like there's something missing in your quality of life and, you know, you want that back, then let's do it.
I love
it. Let's take it head on. So I love to chat with you. You can always find me on Instagram at Yates Nutrition, or just go to my website, yatesnutrition.com. I do offer group coaching and a self-study course. In terms of just doing things, you know, on your own, like I said, I have a self-study course, but just pick up intuitive eating, flip through it, and see if anything sticks out to you. Because I think just reading some of the information, reading some of the studies, it can help you feel like you're not alone and you're not crazy. I think that was one of the biggest things when I started the whole intuitive eating process, was just being like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one that does this. Like, there's studies of, you know, so many people doing this, and I'm not crazy. So even just to not feel alone is worth it, right? So, yeah.
What about red flags for something that might be like masquerading as intuitive eating? Because I feel like that's an issue too, is that this is getting stamped on a lot of things that are like diets in disguise.
Yeah. Honestly, I know this will ruffle some feathers with people, but that's fine. That's what I do for a living, is I ruffle feathers. I would say anybody that's using intuitive eating as a weight loss tactic is a red flag, because at the end of the day, intuitive eating is not the goal is not to manipulate your weight with it. It's to find your healthy weight, and we don't know what that is. It might be lower, it might be higher, it might be the same. So for somebody to utilize that as the vehicle to get to weight loss, what you're going to end up finding is it's just calorie restriction at the end of the day, and that's not in line with intuitive eating. So that's an immediate red flag for sure. I would say that's the biggest one that I see, most common.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us,
Michelle.
Thanks
for having me. I'm so
honored.
Yeah,
and I hope
space.
Thank you. Yeah, we're pretty excited about our new studio. I was showing it off. But for sure, we'll include all your links in our notes.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to check out your material, like I said, if they think it's resonating, I think that would be a great place to start.
Yes, and I do have a podcast as well that I forgot to mention. It's called Nourished and Free. So you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts, except for Spotify. For some reason, they won't accept me.
Oh, no.
Not Spotify, sorry, Pandora.
Pandora.
Still waiting on Pandora, but everywhere
else.
Everywhere else you can find me.
They're picking on you.
I don't know what it is. Maybe they're short-staffed over there, but yeah, I've got lots of different, you can just go through and pick through what my episodes are on, and hopefully it'll stick out to you. So
awesome. Yeah. I love it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
And thanks for joining us for another episode of Feeding the Family. If you're enjoying these episodes, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next Monday for more good stuff.